So both sides, we're now on Sadi Zion Amid Beis, and we have one line left in the Mishnah that for some reason we sort of fell through the crack. So the law of a shivcha is the same identical law as an eved knani, and in both cases, an eved and a shivcha, with shichrur, she becomes a giores. And now her children have the identical status as she does, and when she gets a shichrur, that shichrur is chal not only for herself, but also for her sons, in this case, 2 boys, 2 brothers, and they become gerir. And as we said before, there's no yibum in the case of gerim. In other words, even though they're 2 brothers that are biological brothers, and they are, one was married and died without children, there's no yibum to his brother because they are gerim. So the word v'chein here means, I'm just going to give you, says the Mishnah, another example of 2 brothers that were misguided together with their mother, and their status would be achim bin ha'em, if you recall from yesterday, but not achim bin ha'av. And therefore there would be no yibum. Now the Gemara tells us a story. B'nei Yudan, Amsa. So there was a shivcha by the name of Yudan, Ishtachu. In other words, these 2 sons of Yudan received a get shivur, and automatically they become gerim. So let's stop for a moment and think about this. Let's contemplate. One thing is clear: there's no yibum. Good, that we know. They're gerim. Now the question becomes: can one of them, and it goes in both directions, marry the wife of the other one after his brother dies? Meaning there's no yibum, and for that matter, his brother may have children, but that's irrelevant. But can he marry her? Well, let's just think about this. Strictly speaking, according to halacha, they are not brothers. They're 2 gerim, and gerim are not brothers. And therefore, there should be no reason in the world why one brother can't marry the wife of the other brother after his brother passes on. But on the other hand, they do look like brothers, meaning in the eyes of the spectator, they look like brothers. And therefore, the wife of one of the brother, in the eyes of the spectator, is Eshes Achi. If we're going to allow this brother to marry his wife's sister, people are going to say, well, you can marry Eshes Achi. So Amalei Rav, I'm sorry, I skipped. Sharalahu Rav Acha Bar Yaakov L'mitzav Neshei Da'adadi. Adadi means both ways. Rav Acha Paskin, that each one, depending upon who died, can marry the wife of the late brother. They're not related because you remember the principle I mentioned yesterday. Ger sheniskar kikotin shenoladon. Through Geras, you're not related to any of your biological relatives on a Doraisa level. We have to see about the Drabanans. I have a footnote here. I'm not sure what he says. Okay, fine. Again, this discussion here has nothing to do with Yibum. Keep that in mind. You know what I mean? There's no Yibum situation here, even if they were brothers. The point is they're not brothers because they're both Gerim. And a Ger Kikot should know that no.
I think I just said that Rabbanon like accident because
so I'm not sure what we said yesterday, honestly, David. I've long forgotten what I said yesterday, but what you're saying now is going to be Rava's opinion. Amalei Rava turns to Rav Acha Bar Yaakov and he says to him, for Rav Sheshes Asa. How could you be matir each one of these two brothers to marry the wife of the other brother when Rav Sheshes asked it? And I get the impression here that Rava thinks that Rav Acha should accept the authority of Rav Sheshes, which I don't know why, because they're both Amoraim. Rav Sheshes is not a Tana, you can't go to Mishnah or Raisa. But in any event, Amalei, Rav Acha says to Rava, Hu Asar Anasharina. I have the right to disagree with him. My opinion that it's mutter, even if Rav Sheshes was machmir. In the footnote, he writes that Rav Acha Hayabarala, it was so clear to Rav Acha, based on the Gemara, I don't know which Gemara, that it's mutter to marry, a ger can marry his brother's wife, that he felt he doesn't have to be impressed by Rav Sheshes. If Rav Sheshes is machmir, and to me it's clear that it's mutter. He says he's not sure. This he's quoting the Ritva, whether it's Misfara or Mikabara, either he had a Gemara to rely on or he knew it Misfara. So now, in a very typical, Talmudic style, the Gemara now takes this machlokes and restricts it. There's case X, which is clear l'chumra, case Y, which is clear and unanimous l'kula, and then we have a machlokes in the middle case. Mina av v'lo mina ein, kuli almo lo pligi d'shari. If these two gerim share the same father, but they were born to two different mothers, that means John Paul Jones married Mary and he married Sally, and he had a son from Mary and a son from Sally. Those two gerim did not have the same mother. In that case, he says, when there's no common brotherhood through the mother, but only through the father, then everybody agrees that doesn't even smack of achim, of achva. In other words, no one would consider them achim just simply because they have the same father. In the commentary, you'll take a look at the article and tell you what he says. You have article on your computer? Oh, I forgot that. I assume you have to pay. No, you get it for free? Article on the computer?
I paid 1/3 the price because I had.
Right, but you can't get that for free. No, they would go.
Yeah.
They would go kaput. All right, but anyway, he says the following. He says, Kula Modim, I'm just reading the Masifta commentary. You'll read your commentary. Hopefully they say the same thing. Kula Modim shebutul kol echem em loses es eches achim charehem enom achim ve'elach sho shegam b'Yisrael yavo lahatir loses es eches achim me'achar sheyiru shebutul lager loses eches achim. Even shekulam svurim means everybody understands. Shalafia MSM Enam may also ha'a. What does this mean? Just one second. Shalafia MSM Enam may also ha'a. This I didn't see. I prepared this yesterday, but you have that also in Oscar, that Hema Eno may also have?
That is quite differently.
Want to read it out loud?
Since a proselyte is considered like a newborn baby, he is biblically permitted to marry his first wild brother's wife. Nor is there any reason to prohibit this marriage even rabbinically. not be concerned lest the public seeing us sanction this marriage be misled into thinking that one may marry paternal brother's wife outside the context of the
Paternal brother.
paternal
Right.
brother. No such misconception would result here. The public puts very little stock in the alleged paternity of children conceived by pagan mothers.
Wait, go slowly.
I know,
This is the punchline.
Okay.
This is what he's talking about. Hey, Eino me also Go ahead.
I'm not sure why they assume it's pagan mothers, but okay. No such misconception would result here, because the public puts very little stock in the alleged paternity of children conceived by pagan mothers who were considered licentious. Hence, the public's natural assumption would be that we sanctioned marriage because we did not believe them to be actually brothers at all. I'm not sure.
I'll explain it to you, but that whole paragraph is 4 words in the Masechet, just 4 words. Haim Eino me also ha'af. This is amazing. You know, we live in a world of DNA testing. You could DNA prove that these 2 boys share the same father, I think. I mean, if it's not true, it's a good marshal anyway for the purpose of our discussion. But yet, in the eyes of the public, and the public here might be the Jewish public, might even be the Orthodox Jewish public, I don't know, they don't share the same father. You can prove that they share the same father with testing today, but the man on the street doesn't believe that they have the same father. Because in the non-Jewish world, there's a lot of hanky-panky. And she's sleeping with him and this and that. And you'll never be convinced of who the father is. You know what I mean? So I won't make any comments here, but
I see.
You know, when I was a kid, at least they used to say about certain, you don't know who the father is. I'd be shot publicly for saying that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you grew up. You're also New Yorker, right?
Jersey City. Yeah.
All right, it's over the bridge.
No, I'll tell you. I think we're talking about. That's why they say.
So look, on a Deraisa level, it's irrelevant if the DNA comes back proving that they have the same father because Gekatan Shenola had them. But whatever at the Rabbanan level, I mean, aren't people going to think they're brothers from the father? And he's saying no one's going to believe that they're brothers from the father, or no one's going to assume they're brothers from the father. And if we're officiating at a wedding between this brother and the wife of the other brother, then in the minds of the public, that means they don't share the same father.
And the reason pagan mothers in this case is because they converted.
I think the art scroll is trying to be maybe a little bit diplomatic here. He uses the word pagan because in today's environment and climate, when you hear the word pagan, you think of a primitive society. But I don't believe.
Non-Jewish.
But he doesn't want to use the word non-Jewish. He doesn't want to insult the Gentiles, so he calls them pagans. I know that's my. That's my take on it, but I don't know if I'm right or wrong. But he's saying that kulam svurim the shalafia emes heim eino meoso ha'af, because there's so much promiscuity going on. You're going to assume what these 2 boys have the same father because you assume that she had a relationship with him and she gave birth to him, and then he went to another woman and gave, it's the same man. It's
usually the male is not necessarily the woman.
I guess if he's sowing his seeds in many different places with many different women, then we can assume these 2 guys are brothers. But he's saying that since the women are promiscuous, and then therefore the men, we don't know. When you ask a woman, well, who's the father of this child? And she'll tell you, well, it's Jimmy. But how does she know it's Jimmy? I mean, she had relations with a whole bunch of different people. And that's where the word Zona comes in. But does he use the word Zona? Because he's an English translation. So I don't know. Okay, but in Hebrew it would be Zona.
Right?
Oh, he used that word? No.
He doesn't say permissible. licentious.
Oh, okay, licentious. Licentious is the English translation of the word zona, more or less, in context. So he's asking from the perspective of the public, does the pagan woman know how to identify the father of such that she could be believed to say, well, both of these boys were fathered by the same child? And the answer is licentious. To such an extent that no one in the public is really walking around with the assumption. The only thing that bothers me here is, don't these two boys look alike?
That's why it was two different mothers. They can't be twins, they can't look identical.
So don't they share the same father?
Could be the brother. I mean, you don't know. Too many other family members that you look like too, so I mean.
Not sure I understand you 100%.
I'm just saying, what if it was
I'm
the same
assuming-
father, it was his brother who was with the other one. Their children are gonna look similar.
Oh, I see. They don't
So-
share the same father
Yeah.
because it could be.
But they can still look alike.
I see what you're
because
saying.
they're related.
I see what you're saying. Okay, that's a good point.
There's a lot of.
That's a good point. I'll accept that. Okay, now we go to the other extreme, where everybody agrees that it's usur because in the public eye they look like brothers. Mina'em v'lo mina'av. If I understand correctly, this is the case where a woman gives birth to two boys. We know for sure that they share the same mother. There's no question about that. I mean, today we have surrogate mothers. I don't know if the law would change, but it's kuliyamalo pligi da asiri. In other words, because again, remember we said yesterday that if two people share the same mother, then they are achim mina'em for erva purposes. So he says kuliyamalo pligi da asir. He pligi. So where is the? Yeah, but just 1 second. But keep in mind, this is a drabanan. We're not talking about hora also. We're not talking about leidasa b'kedusha here. In other words, Mary is still married. You know what I mean? Ki pligi. Where is the machlok shin Rav Acha and Rav Sheshes? Min ha'av u'min ha'em. So at this point, I would throw in the towel. If it's min ha'av v'lo min ha'em, for sure this should be also no. Well, what is the fact that they're also brothers from the same father? Why is that a mitigating circumstances to remove the Easter? Do you have my question? Well, once they're achim and ha'em, everybody agrees that we have this gzera d'rabbanan, which would prohibit him from marrying his brother's wife. Well, why does the fact that they're also brothers from the father kick in as a mitigating circumstances to allow for a lenience? And he starts with man d'shari.
Oh. So you think he would take maternal.
Excellent. He says, man d'shari, according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, basar abba shadima. Em holchim achar ha'av. Klomar sheyodim chak shehem achim min ha'av. Why is that so? Below yodim shehem achim gam min ha'em. You know, if you ask me, I would say just the opposite. You know, they come out of the hospital, you know, she gets a tudah of some sort, some legal document, she's the mother of this child, right? Like, for example, in Shari Tzedek, I know, and it's probably true in every hospital in the world, when the baby comes out, they put a what's it called, a plastic bracelet around, you know, and it says the name of the mother. It doesn't say the name of the father. He says the ha b'nei planya karulin. Now the Gemara introduces another variable. When these boys grow up, forget about when they come out of the hospital as newborn babies. What name do we give them? And apparently, even amongst the pagans, they give the father's name. I don't know, that may be changing in our crazy society, but in the old days, in the traditional days, they were called Mr. Brown. He's Mr. Brown and he's Mr. Brown, and they're named with the father's name. So therefore, people identify them, the people, a man on the street, as brothers from the same father. And therefore, says Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, the status of two Gerim who share the same father is that they can marry, each one is allowed to marry the wife of his brother. Why? Because people don't consider them brothers. So you have two brothers with the same last name, but one of them is a nephew, and maybe they're first cousins, but they're not brothers. Rav Sheshes Osar. Why? Kari le nami b'nei plonis. All right, this is women's lib, I guess. He's saying that people also call them the sons of their mother. I would wonder who's raising the children, but let's assume the mother is raising the children. He writes here, Ksheyiru habrios. Brios, again, I think means the man on the street who knows them as the sons of so-and-so, Mary or whatever, is if they see that Mutalev, let's say, Eishes Achem, Yovo Lahatir Gam Yisrael, Eishes Ach. Okay. Now, the way I was trained, this kind of machlokus is very problematic. It's very challenging because, flip a coin. Is it this way? Is it that way? Maybe we should ask a sociologist or I don't know which profession would help us determine whether they're called by their father or by their mother. Again, this is not a legal issue. We're not talking about legalities. Like, let's say, for example, David, maybe you can help me with this. What would be the law in Australia if, let's say, you would marry an American girl? Would the children of that marriage be Australian? Well, they would be, because one parent is enough. Yeah, I'm not sure if every country is like that. There may be other countries where you have to have, or there may be even countries where it depends on the mother, theoretically.
So, my brother married an American girl, so kids are American also.
They have both citizens. They don't have to undergo any naturalization process. No gators, right? But I think there are, again, you'd have to Google this, but there are countries in the world where the laws are much more complicated than that.
Even America, it's not automatic. My grandchildren are not automatic American citizens. My daughter, they were born in America. They were out of the country for a long period of time. That their children can no longer. I have to sponsor those kids, Americans.
But wait, and your son-in-law is not American.
My son, in one case, my son-in-law, my daughter married an American, so their kids could become American citizens. My other daughter married a New Zealander, and they're not automatically American citizens.
So that means that if one parent is American, the other parent is not American, then
and the kids are not American.
It's not automatically American.
They can apply for it through me. I can go to America with special, but I refuse to.
My nephew in the race, but American passport saying, she lived in the English passport in America, but it's in America. I don't know, maybe
Maybe the laws changed.
No. It's a complicated law. It's not so. They have to live in America. If they left America for a certain age and lived outside of America for a certain period of time.
So many.
But if two Americans married, then they have, it makes it a special status. But if the other spouse is not American, it's a different status.
All right. I'm sure the laws are very complicated in every country and so forth and so on. But I was just trying to use that as a mushal because you have these two brothers. Are they called by their mother or the father? I wonder if, in certain countries, either the mother or the father would have a higher status in determining, the citizen, the status of citizenship of the children.
even my grandchildren, they got Australian passports. My daughter, no problem. Only thing is my other daughter.
But they let him in. That's a different question.
That's not my problem.
Right. And if they, and then there's another question, they let him out. Like one of our Mechutanim, in order to get out, had to prove that they were leaving Australia. How did they prove that they're leaving Australia for 3 months? It wasn't enough to show like
Well, that
tickets.
was now. It was now because of the
COVID. So instead, what they had to do is they had to produce a document that someone was replacing them in their place of employment for 3 months.
Really?
We don't need to step back. We just need to saturate the approach. We fill our hands. It took us 3 times to get the Christian to leave. We just need to step back.
It's very complicated.
Australia had very strict laws.
Not everyone's happy with it.
Didn't help.
They still have an African one.
It was. Now they've opened up.
All right, let's try to figure this out. So again, let's just review what we said here. We really have reduced the machlokas by excluding the polar extreme. In a case where they're achim and av, nobody believes that they're achim, and therefore everyone would agree, even according to Rav Sheshes, this one could marry the other brother. Fine. The other extreme where everybody agrees is where they're achim mina'em. If they're achim mina'em, then again, yeah, since they don't have the same father, so they are called by their mother's name. Again, I don't mean that's the legal name, but I mean, say the people in the street, they see them as brothers from the mother. That's problematic because if we're going to allow brothers from the mother, people might think that maternal brothers are not considered brothers in Allah. So even not in the case of Gerim, but in the case of 2 Jews that are born Jewish, if they share the same mother, not the same father, people are going to come to the mistaken conclusion you're allowed to marry. So where is the machlokas? Mina av umina aim, and then you ask what the last name is. So that according to Rav Acha, we're going to say that the last name is Brown, father's name, and we treat them as Achim and Av. And maybe you could also add into the equation the fact that there's a certain element of promiscuity, and people don't assume necessarily that they're Achim and Aim. I don't know. On the other hand, Rav Sheshes is of the opinion that people know them not just as the Brown brothers, they know them as children of the same mother. Now, the Ika the Amri, now we have a second Lishna. Rav Acha bar Yaakov, afilu bi achim mina'em. We said that even Rav Acha would agree in the case of achim mina'em, the fathers are out of the picture. Fathers out of the picture. So all we have is brothers from the same mother. And that's how they're known on the street. Why are we worried about the Gzera? Why would Rav Acha be matir in the case of achim mina'em? My timer, Gershon is Garik Shenolad. Hey, yeah, that's on a Deraisa, but that doesn't help me on a Derabanan level. Let's see what he says there. Kevan Shager who kamo Bria Chadosha, Vafilu Misha Oisalo, Imo Kurva Biodo, Goy, Me'ate Lo Kurve Lav. So they were biological relatives, but now through Gerus, it's Kikot Chenoladon, it's a Bria Chadosha, they're not considered relatives. Is therefore lo yavo lahatir Eishes A. Kevan Sheyadua Shesiba Saheter Hu Hirak Begerim A. According to the second Mishnah, when we officiate at a marriage between the brother who's a ger and his brother ger's wife, people will automatically assume that this is a special case. They will not generalize and make an analogy from gerim to non-gerim, to naturally born Jews. They'll realize that there's halacha in gerus of kikot and shenola. I mean, that's why they're not related, even though they clearly know that they are related to the same mother. If what's also, then it means that they are halachically brothers. We're talking about a case where what? There was no later Kedusha, so therefore they're not related. they're known as sons of the same woman, the same mother, people will know that in Gerim there's a different halach, that Gerim are not related to the fact that Gerim are not halachically related to their biological relatives is well known. That's what it seems to be saying. And now we'll see what can we derive from our Mishnah. Giorish is Gairu Bonea Ima. Right, this was the ratio of our Mishnah. Lo Cholzin v'lo miyapin. My timer, lav mishum dasiri. Why does the Mishnah say that there's no yibum? Is the Mishnah saying that there's no mitzvah of yibum? Or is the Mishnah to be taken, and this we saw earlier in Masechet Yevamot, that sometimes the word yibum means bia, not the mitzvah of yibum per se. And if it says lo miyabmin, it means he's not allowed to marry his brother's wife. I mean, it's one thing to say that there's no mitzvah of yibum, but the Gemara is interpreting lo miyabmin to mean he's not allowed to marry her, even if he wants to. And why is that? Because we're talking about Isha ki yoresh gairu boneo ita, which means clearly that they are achim min ha'em. And now you're going to tell me that if I allow a marriage relationship of Eishes Ach, then people are going to confuse that with achim min ha'em. And therefore, lo miyabim. We can't allow such a marriage because people will confuse that with achim min ha'em. So that would be proof to Rav Sheshes against Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. Right? Because it was Rav Sheshes who said that two Gerim, two brothers had a Gerim, they cannot marry. But again, you have to add one clause over here that we're talking about a case. So wait a minute, wouldn't this depend upon the two Rishonim? So here we're talking about a case where we know who the mother is, correct?
And the father.
Well, I don't know about the father. I'm just saying we said in the first Mishnah that even Rav Acha Bar Yaakov agrees.
Second.
So why does this? Let me just see if any of the notes. I'm not sure if my question is valid. Oh, he writes here that the Tiferes Shmuel, I'm not familiar with that book. Dan means he's weighing the possibilities. Im Kusha Sagamora he lishna kama or lishna basra lidas Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. 1 second. Again, according to Lishna Kama, in this case, everyone would agree it's us. So what's the cash? I don't get it. I thought I was going to get excited here by this quote. What am I missing here? It's close in the low, the up. My time. Asiri. I'm not sure. What am I missing here? Can you help me out, Rabbi Osai? Because I'm very confused. According to the Lishna Kama, in the case of Achim and Aim, everybody agrees that it's us. So why is the Gemara objecting? I mean, I can understand according to Lishna Basra in Rav Acha Bar Yaakov that he disagrees even in the case of Achim and Aim. But he quotes here the Tiferes Shmuel that Kushas HaGemara is the Lishna Kama. Why is it the Lishna Kama? No, when I get stuck with this kind of question, I begin to doubt whether I understand the whole sugya from the beginning. I have to start from scratch here. What is the Gemara's kasha? This is a case where we know who the mother is. In fact, she now has a Jewish name.
You don't necessarily know if it's the same father or not. They both forbid it if you know who the father is. Because it's the same mother, but not the same father.
Well, the first Lishna we said that if we know both the father and the mother, then we have machlokes between Rav Ach and Rav Sheshes.
Right. In this case, you don't know. You know it's the same mother, but you don't know it's the same father.
Right.
So that's what.
Because they might have the same father. Is that what you mean? So if they have the same father, then according to Rav Ach, it should be mutter, and that's Gemara's kasha.
I mean, I'm guessing.
So we have to assume. Now, let's go back to the Mishnah. Is there any indication in the Mishnah that they have the same father? Maybe that would be the missing piece of that puzzle. Hagiorish and Isgairu Banea Ima.
Doesn't say.
That was irrelevant. Initially.
In the first Lishna, if they have the same father, but they don't have the same mother, then everybody agrees it's mutter. But the machlokes is going to be in a case where they have both the same mother and the same father. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. And the Mishnah doesn't talk about the father.
What's the
Because the article says father.
Oh, the article says they have the same father.
Because it says the
Does he-
mother converted after she conceived the first son before he was born.
Wait, go slowly, dude.
So the
So say it once again.
the
Since
mother
she converted,
after she conceived the first son, but before he was born. And the father also converted sometime between the conception of the first and second son.
just 1 second. Since he converted between the conception of what of the first
and second.
First and
And
second.
second son. So it seems to be the same father. Seems to be.
Because since he converted, since he converted. Let's try the second one, right? The second one was Haroso Billy Dust. So it means that he definitely converted before the second one. And therefore, the first, he was a guy at the time that she became pregnant with the first son. That means that we know that they both have the same father. How do we know that? I'm just going to ask a question on the Mishnah itself. The Mishnah says, "Horaso shel Arishon shelo b'kedusha." So do we know who the father is? I guess we know who the father is. Otherwise, it's called. Why is it called shelo b'kedusha unless we know who the father is? So we must know who the father. How do we know with DNA testing? I don't know exactly. I'm a little bit confused about that point. He says, "Goy shenasa goyo v'yolda lo shnei banim." Nisgairo ha'em im banel. So again, that we have to answer that question, but that's at least a major progress that we made in the sugya. This Gemara's kasha is from the Reish of the Mishnah, which gives the Gemara the assumption that we know who the father is. And if we know who the father is, I'm not sure exactly how, but let's say we know who the father is, then these are brothers that share both the same mother and the same father, which is a machlokus between Rav Sheshes and Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. And Rav Acha Bar Yaakov is going to say that their last name is, what a little confusing because whatever it is, I don't know, but whatever name the father takes on, let's say, he used to be Brown. I don't know. Now as a Jew, maybe he changed his last name. I don't know. But whatever his name is, the boys are called by the same name. And that's why Rav Acha would say that there's no problem in marrying the Eishes Ach, because in the case of what? Because they don't believe. I don't understand. They don't believe that they're brothers. Why wouldn't they believe they're brothers? Now I'm really confused.
Are we talking the brothers are the ones who are the Gator?
Mother also.
Well, the mother also is a Geras, and even the father is a Geras, because we say that the second brother was Horaso
Why are the brothers?
B'Kedusha, no?
If they were born, then they're Achim.
Mena'eh. And therefore what? Therefore, Lo B'Yavim went to everybody.
Just like anybody. They were Jewish at birth.
We don't worry about
No,
that.
that's not
That doesn't make any.
Even
Then they
if
convert.
Who can work?
The brothers and the mother and the two sons converted together. What it said.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, that
no, I know it said.
so then it's Ashes. It's
But they're like newborn, why doesn't the principle they're like newborn babies? Therefore, they're not considered.
Just 1 second. Yeah, 1 second. Since they, well, wait a second. They were both. I don't know if you apply newborn babies since the mother converted before these two boys were born. So that's called Leidasa B'Kedusha.
So they converted together. They're like, it says they converted together, not before. Together.
So what's Leidasa B'Kedusha?
Although the question is, how can children, we raise the question, how can children, maybe they were older.
Wait a second. Apparently there are two cases in the Mishnah. Giyorish and Isgairu Banea Ima. So that's not Horaso or Leidasa B'Kedusha. Right? This is a whole family of a mother and two sons who are coming for Gerus. Then the Mishnah goes on to say Afilu. So the Afilu is already more complicated. Why? Harasa shel harishon shelo b'kedusha, v'leidaso b'kedusha. Hasheni haraso b'kedusha, leidaso b'kedusha. Nechshavim heim li'achim mina'im. Kem sheshneim noldu li'achim shenizkaira. Mikom makom ein ala ach chovas yibum. Right, because Chovas Yibum depends upon Achim and A'ah.
Depends on the absence.
So what's the afilu? Afilu means that there's no yibum. Oh, afilu means that the word afilu means that there's no yibum, even in a case where there was leidasa b'kedusha for both these brothers, because that only makes them achim and aim, but then there's no yibum. But now the Gemara is going a step further, and the Gemara is assuming that we're not even going to allow him to marry her. Now, why can't he marry her? Just 1 second. Since they were both leidasa, so that's leidasa b'kedusha. But now the Gemara is going back to the Reisha. What happened in the Reisha? The Mishnah, Gioris and his Gairu Bonel Ima. So what happens now? Both have the same mother. We have to assume also they have the same father, because otherwise, why is Gemara asking Kashman Ravach? If they have the same mother and that's all they have is the same mother, then even Ravach would agree it's us. So from the fact that Gemara is attacking Ravach from that Mishnah, it seems that the ratio of the Mishnah is talking about a case where they have the same father. And the language of the Mishnah, I don't know. How do we know that Agyoshin is Gairu Bonel Imo means they have the same father? That's what I don't have. How do we know they have the same father? You're still missing a piece.
That wouldn't if you had different fathers. That wouldn't be brothers from the father.
Right, but told the Gemara that we're talking about brothers from the father. You're asking a Kasha on Ravacha, he's going to tell you they're not brothers from the
We
father.
want to see that God has told you. So the fear to do first means they're not brothers. So they're trying to work out which way would it be brothers, only if it's the same father. It's different fathers and it's not brothers. Yeah.
So you mean there's no chiddush? Is that what you're saying? It's like sheep.
Yeah.
I mean, why can't it be just to argue the opposite position that the Mishnah is telling you that two achim from the same mother, there's no yibum?
Because we know that Hebrew doesn't have nothing to
Now,
do
we
with
know
mother, it's a different father.
So and how do we know? Just in reality, how do we know that they have the same father? Because again, the case is a woman brings two children for gerus. How do we know that they share the same father? Will we trust her or something? Maybe she's trustworthy. Now that she's a gerus, we can trust her, and she can say,
before she was a plus, before there's no name on us.
right. But now maybe she gets them up. I'm not just shooting in the dark here. I'm trying to figure out how do we know that they have the same father? I mean, she's a gerus.
Well, so if the Mishnah says lo belitzin below Milavin,
Right.
the only reason why we would think that there would be the possibility of either one of those is if they share a father.
Right, that's what David's saying. But I'm just asking you, how do we know on the ground? Just tachlis. How do we know they have the same father?
Maybe what she's
No, you're telling me that logically the Mishnah, in order to be machadish something, is telling me that they have the same father, and yet there's no yibum. I agree with you. Let's say I accept that. But I'm just asking Lamaisa, Bashetach, in the mitzias of the case, in the scenario, how did we talk and know that they have the same father?
Why did they add those rules?
No. You're answering two different questions. You're proving to me that the Mishnah is addressing a case where they have the same father. Kibalti. But I'm just asking, how do we know that they have the same father? The Mishnah is talking about a case where they have the same father, but how did the Mishnah know that they had the same father?
So
a woman comes to Gerus with two children. How do they know that? How do we know that they didn't have DNA testing?
From what she's misguided, I mean, you say that we believe that she's there to say that.
Maybe, but again, we're adding a whole new. Yeah, I'd feel a lot more comfortable if somebody said this. We're really adding a whole new curveball. All right, we'll stop here. Someone, I'll try to go over this again.
And house.
Wait 1 second.
This is not it. No, yeah, I got a,
Everybody agrees in the case of the office.
oh, no,
That really came.
I have a laptop and it's just. Every once in a while, it works great, but every once in a while it just crashes. I'm in the middle of something, all of a sudden. So, yeah, it's funny. They have me in race. We have different chairs. Yeah, it takes a while to boot up. That's what I have, that's what I meant. Which, when I bought it, top of the line. This is top of the line. But, this one's, a cheaper thing, and I bought it, now, I wanted to grab it.
Why the Gemara says Kasha from the case of Atmanaim, everybody agrees that Atmanaim is us. Why is the Mishnah spirit? That's what we're missing.
And I made a decision.